We told you we were going to monitor the situation, and I'm happy to report that just in, looks like TSA agents are going to get paid. It has been confirmed. So check it out.
Good.
Chad, we need some clarity. What is happening and what just happened on Capitol Hill?
Well, if you're standing in line watching the screens at the airport and moaning about how long you're having to stand in line, that's going to be a problem. The reason is because the government shutdown is going to continue. The House and Senate clearly are just not on the same page. The Senate last night approved a bill that would fund everything at DHS with the exception of ICE. That's something that Democrats wanted. The Democrats did not want, or did want, I should say, some of these reforms at ICE. They did not get that. Democrats kind of championed that, and that was sent over to the House of Representatives. And immediately this morning, when we thought there was a ray of hope as dawn fell on Washington, D.C., we suddenly learned that that was not going to be the case here. There was a lot of grumbling on the Republican side of the aisle. We knew that this would take a pretty interesting piece of parliamentary algebra to pass a combination of Democrats and Republicans in the House to agree to this. There were some Republicans who were just never going to go for this because they didn't.
And they're out for 2 weeks, so it's going to continue, and we'll see how long this actually ends up lasting. We're going to surpass the previous shutdown, which was, I want to say, approximately 42 days or so.
The idea that you were splitting up funding for the Department of Homeland
We're knocking on that door right now.
Security and not funding ICE. Meantime, the whole idea here is that you would have to bring some Democrats on board. Liberals, progressives would not like that simply because there weren't those reforms to ICE. Then the other problem here is that you had people in the middle who said, I want to see bill text. I want to understand what the Senate did, because there was not a conversation. This passed by voice vote in the middle of the night in the Senate at about 2:12, 2:14 in the morning. Well, let me just kind of walk you through the day, because this has been a very organic day where we've thought there's been a deal, maybe not. It's changed. To give you a sense here, that Mike Johnson's press conference a bit ago was delayed by about an hour. Hakeem Jeffries was supposed to have a press conference. That still hasn't happened. But by mid-morning, there was the sense that conservatives in the House were opposed to this. And suddenly there was a growing universe of Democrats in the House who would be in favor of this and line up. And the idea that, if you were going to pass the bill with some Republicans and mostly Democrats, even though Republicans have the majority, a slim one in the House of Representatives.
Come on, Chad, get to it. Get to it.
Be a bad look for Republicans. Hakeem Jeffries finally said, I think that this is a good deal. Finally, you had Rosa DeLauro, the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, calling this a win. I thought it was interesting.
All promising conjecture, all promising words, but obviously they get to the deal, so let's just get to the meat and the potatoes.
Jeffries was willing to sign off on this and kind of call the Republican bluff again, even though he didn't get exactly what he wanted. He said several weeks ago when Kristi Noem was out as the Homeland Security Secretary that just putting Markwayne Mullin in as a replacement was not enough for them to change their position. They wanted concrete reforms in legislative.
For those that didn't know, Department of Homeland Security Secretary has been relieved. Kristi Noem, she has been replaced by Markwayne Mullin. So we'll see the direction that Department of Homeland Security takes due to a change in leadership.
Language to say this is what we're going to see with ICE, and they certainly never got that in this agreement. Now let me walk you through what happened in the Senate last night and why this so offended so many Republicans in the House, especially conservatives. Neither body likes being jammed. That's a problem, and the House just was jammed by the Senate essentially, guys.
Hey, Chad, just before you go into the detail on that, a little bit of breaking news. I'm told that President Trump just signed the executive order that would give the current paychecks, at least, to TSA agents. I don't know if that would include the back pay. I'm not sure if it would, but President Trump apparently just signed.
Well, that's a good point. I was hoping that their compensation package would include the 30-odd days that if they're going to get their current paycheck, so they would only be they missed 2 paychecks. This would have been their third. So they'll still be out of 2. Okay, hopefully they're made whole, but They probably need more than one paycheck. So let's see what they say.
Information coming to me. This executive order, which would pay TSA. So it looks like there will be something coming to their bank accounts very soon, if not in the next few hours, in the next day or two, I'm sure. But then going forward.
And we're all paid in arrears. So, you're paid for work that has been done. So that would be going on the 3rd, though. Let's see.
I have never seen Mike Johnson like that. He is under pressure. He is the coolest, calmest guy. Never really see him get upset. He looked.
Yeah, I said the same thing, but he seemed pissed,
stressed out.
Yeah, well, a couple of things there is that number one, I think,
or agitated at a minimum.
Felt that he was rolled by the Senate, the majority leader. He also had to demonstrate that he was fighting for this position, the House Republican position, so there's internal Republican politics involved, and there's always this natural tension between the House and Senate. So I asked him why, if you had Senate Republicans, remember there's 53 Senate Republicans, John Thune is the Senate majority leader, why he signed off on that. And this was our exchange just a few minutes ago. Thune are not on the same page. You came out and criticized Democrats. He was the engineer behind this. Why are you guys not on the same page? And are you not extending the shutdown? If you were to accept what the Senate had passed, this could end tonight and the TSA lines would shrink.
I wouldn't call John Thune the engineer of this. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate. Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the Senate have forced this upon the Senate. I have to protect the House. Let me answer the question, Chad. I have to protect the House. And I have to protect the American people. That's our responsibility. Our colleagues on this side understand this is not a game. We are not playing their games. These people want open borders and they want criminal illegal aliens in the country. They do not want to enforce the law. They want to literally defund. You just read it in the bill here. They want to give.
Though that's Speaker Johnson's words, so let's take note of that and let's remember that and let's proceed.
$0 to enforcing federal immigration laws and keeping the border secure. That was the biggest issue in the election of 2024, the wide open border that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris hoisted upon the country. And 20 million, by some estimates, 20 million dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, including.
They just seem too far. If a slither of that is true, they just seem too far apart. Hey, we're here to report it as it is. They're just way too far apart.
That number came over the border. We have terrorists in our country. We have obviously murderers. They're putting it on display. And then these big blue cities that have sanctuary city policies, they're releasing these people onto the streets. They released them over the border when they came over under the Biden years. And that is the turmoil that we're facing right now. The very serious threats to the homeland and everybody. It's not just long lines at the airport. It is the danger and safety of everyone.
So Mike Johnson, he called that proposal from the Senate, again passed by the Republican-led Senate, a joke. Now, on a voice vote, and this is going to be very important, there is something in the Senate called a hotline. And so sometime late last night, John Thune on the Republican side, the Democrats, Chuck Schumer on the Democratic side, they ran a hotline. This is a message that goes around universally to all 100 senators. And sometimes if you have a bill or an amendment or any...
You just got to listen to both and try to listen to keywords. Just like Speaker Johnson said, these blue cities, he said they have sanctuary cities. So I'm pretty sure only blue cities do have the sanctuary city in place, though. So, yeah, we'll monitor the situation, try to decipher as best as we can.
That you want to advance quickly, you can do so if everybody agrees. Well, nobody objected. And so they said, okay, we're going to come in and do this. Anybody could have come in and flagged this ahead of time, even before they go to the floor, and said, hey, we're not going to pass this. This was not a unanimous consent request where somebody actually comes and objected. But you do this, off stage and say, I'm going to have a problem with this. And then they might force you to come down to the floor and object. So what Mike Johnson wants to do is kind of put the shoe on the other foot here, pass a bill that is different from the Senate.
There actually should have been no recess until we got a resolution or we got an agreement. That should have been a course of action, or as we like to call it, a COA.
Keep DHS open for 60 days, 2 months here, fund everything, and force the Senate when there is a brief pro forma session. Remember, there's basic...
That sounds like a compromise. Do a 60-day deal, a 60-day agreement. and then you still fund everything, and then you still can do your negotiations. In the meantime, it's like a Band-Aid.
Everybody hit the airports early this morning and the train stations as soon as the sun came up to have somebody, in their mind, preferably a Democrat, come back and object to that.
Obviously, a dollar amount will be attached to that. That's 60 days.
And then they can pin this on the Democrats. So already we have this staring match going on since last night. I thought it was interesting. There was a statement sent out this morning from Rick Scott, the Republican senator from Florida, who said that he opposed the proposal. He opposed the bill that was passed by the Senate last night. And I reached out to his office and I said, well, if you oppose it, why didn't he go down to the floor and object, or on the hotline tell the Senate Republican leadership, I have a problem with this? That never happened. So there's a lot of people saying I oppose something, but they didn't do anything about it on the floor when they could.
Chad, it's Larry. Can I just ask a question?
Surely.
Because I'm somewhat confused. My
You and me both, Larry. You and me both.
as you pointed out, the Democrats wanted reforms. They wanted to roll back a lot of ICE jurisdictions and efforts. Okay, that did not happen in the Senate bill. Now, the funding part, my understanding is it was never about funding because ICE and the Customs Bureau was funded through one big beautiful bill through 2029. Now,
that is a fact. They're doing a lot of hooping and hollering when ICE already has their funding secured. I'm pretty sure it hasn't been distributed though. They may agree to how much it's going to be, but it still comes in increments. That I know.
is there an issue here that somehow administrative funding was necessary and didn't get it? No, when Mike Johnson says ICE must be funded, and I agree with him about the border and other things he said, I just wasn't aware that ICE funding was even an issue. ICE reforms, as you put it, I call just, rolling back. That, yes, I get it. And that they didn't get, the Democrats. But ICE funding? What? I don't understand that.
There is a bit of a dispute, frankly. I mean, you'll talk to some people and they will say, hey, there is, money through the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah, when they say reform, they're speaking of the practices that the ICE officers are using, has been documented. But the reform, that's not, for context, it's not budget. So, I don't know. Let's listen.
That funds everything at ICE through 2029. And there's others like Rick Scott, who I'll cite again here, who indicated that things aren't. I mean, I talked to him extensively in the hall about this the other day. So sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder, frankly, and that's why we're having a little bit of a challenge to get an answer on this score. But the bottom line here is that, we thought that they might be able to address this shutdown and put this fire out by tonight. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Now, sometimes, I will say this, and this is very important, guys, that things get really bad, and they have devolved really bad. We are 10 feet deep right now. Sometimes it has to get that bad before things come back up. But Chuck Schumer has already demonstrated that they have opposition to this Republican plan in the House. And again, this would all be on the Republicans. They have that narrow margin. They have to have, their votes to pass their bill. I mean, that would be the ultimate problem if they can't pass their own bill, because the Democrats will say, well, we were willing to help on the bill that the Senate passed because that was a bipartisan bill.
Make no mistake. We call it a game for lack of better terms, but this is going to cause effects during midterms and elections. So again, these individuals, these lawmakers, or Congress, I should say, they're smart. They're smart cookies. So they know what they're doing. This is strategic. And, that's just a part of their strategy. And I'm guarantee you that it's going to affect, the voters. Because that's just how this thing is played. And, this is going to cause we'll monitor it. We'll see how midterms go. And we'll see if more. We'll see the effects of midterms. How about that? And the talking points of the candidates, in lieu of the current events.
And this has kind of changed a little bit in the past few years here. A lot of times you would have something that would pass in the Senate, and that would give air cover for House members on both sides of the aisle to pass a bill, because you have senators who represent an entire state. Sometimes you have a Republican and a Democratic senator from a given state. And so sometimes that would give them, the ability to pass something. That's not working in this instance, right?
Just want to note, Chad, as the president makes his way down, to John's point about the emergency funding, that the president has signed. A memorandum went out about 10 minutes ago, signed by the president, promising that.
So the president had to essentially sign an EO, an executive order, is what it sounds like, to get TSA agents. This is definitely a band-aid to get them at least their current paycheck. That's what it sounds like.
He will take care of these TSA workers. As President of the United States, he's determined that these circumstances constitute an emergency situation compromising the nation's security. So the White House has put out an official memorandum for the Secretary of Homeland Security through the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. So they're looking to take care of these TSA workers as this fight rages on. Chad, real quickly, still wondering how that is. So Larry's still puzzled about the funding. Like, if it.
There have been reports of TSA agents, they're getting evicted, their rent was due. I find it shocking that whoever they pay their rent to wouldn't at least understand the situation and hold it into abeyance. I found that kind of shocking, but there are reports coming in that they're definitely falling on hard times, and some of them are facing eviction. A lot of them have been doing DoorDash and things of that nature just to get by. So it's unfortunate.
That the fight over the ICE was the reforms. And if the Senate, obviously, the House is not aligning with the Senate, and the House and Speaker Johnson says we've got to fund ICE, but ICE is funded through 2029 through the big, beautiful bill. How do you explain that to somebody?
You see, Mike Johnson had people telling him in his conference, he said, we're not going to, not help ICE out. That these people deserve to be paid. We deserve to. And they also were very resistant to breaking off part of that spending bill. That's something they don't like, the idea of setting a bad precedent for that in the appropriations process. The idea that you have a bill that funds the Department of Homeland Security. That's one of the 12 annual appropriations bills. And then you're breaking that up into 3/5 or, 1/2 or whatever you want to do there. That starts to create big problems. You can do that, but I remember talking to Katie Britt, the Republican senator from Alabama, about this last week, and she was trying to get a deal here, but she really worried about that for setting precedent for going forward. Here's one thing I want to leave folks on. I always say that it's about the math. And when we came up to the precipice of a government shutdown in March of last year, a lot of people thought, they might not be able to have the votes to unlock this box. They went for 43 days last fall. We've gone for, how many different iterations now since last fall and into the winter and now spring again with the Homeland Security Department. So it's possible that there might not be a combination on this lock that people can work. They have to have the math be able to work in both the House and Senate, and they might be locked in a box right now that they just can't get out of.
All right, Chad Pergament for us, watching everything on Cap.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, Chad. That was long-winded to not really say much, but thank you for your reporting on that. So with that being said, TSA agents are getting some income. Hopefully they can weather the storm and continue to hold on. A bill's going to have to get passed sooner or later. I would definitely talk to my creditors if I'm in their situation, if their savings have been depleted, and, look for something new if that's your forte. It's not as easy. People think, people say, why don't they just quit? Why don't they just quit? It's not that easy just to up and change careers, especially if you devoted a significant amount of time with that organization. So again, thoughts and prayers out to TSA agents. We'll monitor the situation, and best of luck to you, and just hang in there.